Call the order.
Alan? Alan?
Yeah, I'm here.
Engels? Bontrager? Pavilio?
Here?
Walkley? Alt?
Here.
Nichols?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. And approval agenda.
I move we
Okay.
approve the agenda as presented.
A second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
Okay.
And approval of meeting, minutes for the last meeting.
Let me do a quick vote on that.
Oh, that's right.
If I
Sorry.
could, please. No, that's fine. Alt?
Yes.
Engels? Pavilio?
Yes.
Walkley? Allen?
Yep.
Bontrager? Nichols?
Yes.
Got her.
Okay. Have approval of minutes or any additions or deletions or whatever?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
You got a second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
Allen?
Yes.
Bontrager? Engels? Alt?
Yes.
Pavilio?
Yes.
Walkley? Knight? Nichols?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, public hearing. Your turn.
My turn. What we have is, we have a application, a rear yard setback variance application submitted by Al and Kim. Do I pronounce it right? Is it Rennick or Reineck? Reineck, okay. And they currently live out in Cherry Grove Township, but they purchased this home and their plans are to completely pretty much gut the inside, strip the exterior, make a lot of changes, and then add on to it accordingly. This picture here is just the rear view. So essentially what they're asking, what they're looking for, is they want to build to the south and off the alley. They're requesting a 12-foot variance. The setback in this R1 zone district is 35 feet. So this 12-foot variance would have, for example, the soffits of the garage 23 feet off the alley, and the actual structure of the garage would be 25 feet off the alley. And they want to go out in that direction. What they're looking at is, when they do this, they want to be able to get to the garage via the alley versus pulling in and backing off of Shelby Street. You know, that's one of the reasons for it. And along with that, that's one reason that the site plan that you have in your packet, you've got their application, their site plan, and I included photos. But the site plan you have is not their final site plan. Before they spend a lot of money with architectural drawings, et cetera, they basically want to find out if they're going to be able to build towards the alley with the garage portion of the home as they are asking. So this is not a final site plan, but they would make their final site plan based on a decision that you folks would make. An interesting thing, they have had this property surveyed. What they discovered is the house does not line up perfectly parallel with the property lines. So when you do look at Mr. Reineck's drawings, you'll notice there, for example, off the alley, he has to the east 25 feet 4 inches, and to the south, or to the west 25 feet 9 inches. And that's because the current structure is not lined up perfectly parallel on the lot. Going through the PowerPoint here, again, I'd mentioned they plan to, the intention is to build a new home, but they're going to use the existing home, gut it, remodel it, and then add on to it. The footprint of the current home, this includes the soffits, the garage, everything, I measured with the GIS, which is not perfect, at 2,112 square feet, well below the allowed square footage for a R1 zone district of a lot that size. Their lot is quite large. It's 132 feet wide. It's actually one of the few conforming size lots in that entire neighborhood. Because R1 zone districts, they call for a minimum lot width of 100 feet. And pretty much almost every surrounding property, their lot widths are 66 feet. So this happens to be actually one of the few conforming size lots in that entire neighborhood. I'm gonna real quick refer to the GIS that you have. And if any of you drove down the alley, you can see that years ago, some structures were allowed to be literally built right on the alley behind them. What they also discovered when they got their survey done is this house here is actually lined up less than 4 feet from their property line. So, for example, this lot here, not only is it a non-conforming width, a non-conforming size, but it has a non-conforming side yard setback, etc. Clearly, these lots have non-conforming setbacks. So there's a lot of non-conformities in this neighborhood. And ironically, all the lots going farther up Chestnut Street to the west, for a full block, they're basically 66-foot wide lots, non-conforming lots. So, you know, and you can see at one point, 2 lots were here and they were wisely combined. And that's how you have 132 feet, but that's what they purchased. In the GIS you're looking at, they have already hired people to come in and remove some trees and so forth. And one was this big pine here, which actually, as you can see, was hanging over the neighbor's house, but it was actually primarily on their property. So in their final design, what they're essentially asking is when they do add on to the home, put the garages, they would like the building to be able to come as close as 25 feet to the property line of the alley, and that does not include the soffit, but of course the cars below the soffit. So the building, what they're asking is that if they could build the main structure out to within 25 feet of the lot line, and then if there's a 2-foot soffit, that would actually, you know, make it 23 feet. And what they're talking about, again, they don't have their final architectural plans, but the type of garage they're looking at building at this end, they're actually looking at having a room that can be accessed from the 2nd story of the house in the garage, and she would use that like as a craft room for crafts and different stuff where she does that. So, you know, there's a lot of thought to what they would like to do, but again, final plans, they're not into it yet until they're more confident with what they're going to be allowed to do. This slide here shows, and I'd mentioned earlier, the buildings that were built right on the alley. This is from the parking lot of the senior center, the old Naval Reserve building and the senior center, looking down the alley towards the west, and you can see their home in the far right, and get a feel for how it looks from that direction. Again, their request, it's to allow them to reconstruct the home and add on to the south. There's no variance required for the front yard. The current front of the building is, I believe, roughly, I think he measured 51 feet from the front lot line, so it's well back. The rear of the home, I believe, is about currently 60 feet from the property line of the alley to the south. So it's set back pretty good with the additions they want to do. There certainly are no issues with side yard setbacks or anything like that. So they're asking for a rear yard variance totaling 12 feet, that includes the soffit. Section 4669(4) of the Code of Ordinance states, in consideration of a variance, the Zoning Board of Appeals must determine that the proposed variance will not result in conditions which, 1, impair an adequate supply of light and air to the adjacent properties. Unreasonably increase congestion in public streets. 3, increase the danger of fire and endanger the public safety. 4, unreasonably diminish or impair established property values within the surrounding area. And lastly, 5, in any other respect, impair the public health, safety, comfort, morals, or welfare of the inhabitants of the city. In staff opinion, the findings on those 5 are, first off, I certainly don't feel it's going to have any impact on light and air to adjacent properties. And in fact, by removing some trees, they've actually improved the flow of light and air to the property immediately to their east already. Also, staff feels this request, it should not impact traffic congestion on public streets. And again, one reason they would like to have the garage doors on the south side of the home is so that they would not, for example, need to back out of a garage onto Selma Street. You know, they would be able to, you know, back up and get to Selma from there. In fact, the public safety may be improved. This structure has been vacant for quite a while. It's dilapidated, it's in poor condition, and actually rebuilding it up to code certainly may actually improve the safety of that structure. It should, and you know, potentially neighboring properties also. As far as property values, a new home on this site may very well actually improve the neighboring property values. And lastly, health, safety, welfare of the community. Construction of a new home should not impair any of that in any way. And of course, any construction that's done is going to have to meet the fire code and the Michigan residential construction codes. So it certainly will improve that property and potentially neighbors. Again, from section 46-656, the Code of Ordinances, ironically, and I put some information in your packets on accessory buildings. That section has to do with accessory buildings, and ironically, you can build an accessory building within 3 feet of a property line in the rear and side yard. So they could actually build a accessory garage, and if it was detached from the home and be more than 10 feet from the home, they could actually build it 3 feet from the alley, and they wouldn't even need to come before the Zoning Board of Appeals. That would be a staff approval. And that's actually how the ordinance currently reads. So they would like to have this, you know, as an option attached to their home versus having it be a separate accessory building on the property. Staff finding, as I'd pointed out in the GIS and in photos, there are multiple non-conforming rear yard and side yard setbacks already in this immediate neighborhood area. And the following picture was actually taken from the back corner of the Reineck's property, and you know, you can see what is directly behind their property on the other side of the alley. So you have some obviously some nonconformities with our Code of Ordinances in place already in that neighborhood. Public notices, as all of you know, Michigan Zoning Enabling Act requires us to send public notices not less than 15 days prior to this hearing date. Notice was placed in the Cadillac News. Property owners within 300 feet of the site were given notice via first-class mail. We received no correspondence, no phone calls, anybody objecting in any way, shape, or form to what they are proposing and what they're asking from this Zoning Board of Appeals. Lastly, this board action, Zoning Board of Appeals, based on a finding of compliance or non-compliance with the standards of the ordinance, the board shall approve with conditions, or deny this variance application. Reasonable conditions may be attached to an approval in order to achieve compliance with the standards. With that, this is actually a front view. I was standing at the corner of Selma and Chestnut, and this is from the front of the house to the north looking south. Having said all that, the Reinicks are here if you have any questions for me or if you have any questions for them.
Can you talk about the two sections of the ordinance kind of operating at cross purposes to each other? The setback under accessory buildings and under residential?
Right. The ordinance, accessory buildings are considered any detached accessory building to any type of residential or commercial district. When we review site plans for sheds or detached garages, the first thing we look at is it in the rear yard? The way some lots are set up, you don't have room in a rear yard, so we might allow it in a side yard. But the ordinance calls for detached accessory buildings, which can be a detached two-car garage. Number one, it needs to be at least 10 feet away from the main structure, or you can get closer, but the structure should have 1 hour fire-rated walls, any wall that is near the home within 10 feet. You can build an accessory structure and take up to 25% of the rear yard. You can also build like an accessory garage, and it can be of a size up to 65% of the footprint of the home. You know, not the, if it's 2-story, not adding both, but you look at the footprint, you do a GIS measurement, and they can size-wise build it up to 65%. So it's pretty easy to build like a 2-car garage, sometimes even bigger as an accessory building. But the real catch to it is you only have to be a minimum 3 feet from any neighboring side yard and 3 feet from any neighboring rear yard or alley. So essentially, if they redo this home, they could put an accessory building, and if they wished, and I know based on what across the alley looks like, I don't imagine that would be the case, they could actually build like a 2 or 3 car garage potentially, and not have to come before the ZBA, just keep it off the property lines. But their intent is, one option I should say they want to have. This is an option they want to have because their final design is not completed, and it won't be until they know what they can do. But they would actually like to build it to the south, towards the alley. They happen to have some older cars that have been in their family for years, so they have those currently out in Cherry Grove Township. So, you know, they want to build a large garage to have, you know, their vehicles in it, but they do wish to get closer to the alley property line than the 35-foot setback off the rear alley property line. And we had talked with them, and, you know, we talked about things such as lengths of trucks, et cetera, and that's where the 25 feet off the alley came from. And of course, soffits above would stick out, a vehicle would be under it. But they basically want to have room on the south to build a garage that would be able to accommodate these vehicles. And see, currently, let's go here. Currently, I believe there is I think it's a 1-stall garage here. But what they would like to do is, of course, they want a larger garage, but they want to be able to park here. And obviously, this lot is so big, I mean, they could park pretty much anywhere.
I guess
Does that kind of answer your question?
well, I think my question was more, what was the planning commission's intent in allowing
That.
an accessory building to be within 3 feet of the property line, but having a 35-foot setback for,
Right, for a-
for an attached garage, which essentially seems to be the same thing.
Sure. I'd love to to answer that, but the ordinance goes back to the early 1980s. And as you know, I've worked here 3.5 years. You know, the intent, I'm not sure. I mean, you know, you look all around town and, you know, there are sheds that unfortunately are not 3 feet from property lines, and they do create issues. I always like to tell people the reason I like the 3 foot is so you can get a lawnmower between a fence and the shed, so you don't have, you know, knee-deep grass and, you know, and rodents and everything. But as far as the intent of the ordinance, I don't have an answer for that. I do not have an answer for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Mike?
Not for Mike.
Okay, we'll open up for public comments.
Do you have any questions for them?
When you remodel the house, is the access gonna be the same as it is now, or is there,
You mean the front door to the house? Yes.
okay. This pole barn you're gonna build, is the siding gonna match the house?
They're not necessarily gonna build a pole barn, am I correct?
Right, it's.
Well, this says it is.
Oh, I'm sorry, yep.
It may be a pole barn structure, or it may be a poured concrete frame garage. We haven't totally decided on that either. But yes, it will totally match the house, everything. You will not be able to tell how it's framed from the outside.
Okay.
Now I understand. I apologize. I didn't understand your question. Now I got it. Now I got it.
Can I answer a question on the front door? The actual front door of the house, because there's been so many additions and everything, actually is on the side. So we will
Yeah.
improve that.
We're putting a new door in it, but that's where the door will be.
And is the front of the house, from a zoning standpoint, is it determined where the address is? As this sits on a corner
yes,
lot,
Yes, yes. This particular house, the front yard is considered to be Chestnut Street. That is the front of the house. So Selma Street being the side, that is the side yard, and the R1 zone district, a side yard setback can be a minimum of 10 feet. Now, this home is quite old, and the ordinance now actually has items within it that talk about corner lots and not having this situation. If someone came to build a brand let's say this thing was demolished tomorrow, and someone came to the city and wanted to rebuild it, we would certainly strongly suggest they set it back farther off the sidewalk on Selma. And if they wanted to come closer, they would have to come before you. Because if this were to be destroyed, we would certainly ask them to have that side yard setback farther also. But looking at the GIS on this is what I found interesting with the GIS, is my gut feeling is when this house was built, it was built on a 66-foot wide lot. And at some point, years ago, the home that was here is gone, and then the homeowner somewhere bought it and then combined the lots. Because for it to be 132 feet, lots, they were combined at some point in the past.
Well,
And
sure.
the nice part of it is it made it a conforming size.
I don't know if any of you drove down the alley. I went down it twice, because one time I went down there just to look at it. The second time, I was over there picking a lawnmower up from one of his neighbors and the trailer behind it. little scary. I was thinking it was gonna take the one house. And they got more than enough room not to have that problem. So we already, got a motion or any other questions?
I got no more questions.
We have a motion. I can't do it. I think it's gonna make the area look a lot nicer. And it's gonna far enough off the alley so that somebody goes down there, not gonna clip a back of a car.
I'll make a motion to approve the variance.
I'll second it.
Okay. Okay, your turn, Mike.
Okay, start with the people that aren't here. Walkley, Engels, Bontrager, Allen,
Yeah.
Knight, Alt,
Yes.
Pavilio,
Yes.
Nichols.
Yes.
The motion passes. Your variance has been approved,
Go have fun.
so.
How's your brother?
It's a really nice
What kind of cars do you got?
He has a 67 Chevy Nova, that was his grandparents, and I have a 76 Chrysler Cordova.
Nice.
Well, it was my grandma and grandpa's, so.
Very nice.
Great.
What's your brother up to?
He's in, Florida.
Yes, huh? Went to school with his brother.
Oh,
He retired.
Oh, yeah. I guess we'll call the meeting. Oh, no, I know Miss Land's business. Board member comments? And we're adjourned. Go home.
time to go home.
Yep.
Good.
Get BS and forgetting.
Turn the camera off, now we'll talk.
Al, Kim, thanks for coming. Good luck with